Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
Back when I was in high school, my schedule was like so tough, especially when I was a freshman. I would wake up at like 5 in the morning, just trying to get through the day. 5 in the morning, it would be early morning seminary. And then, of course, I got school right after that. And then I got football practice after that. And then I got to do my homework after that. And there were literally days where I would leave the house at 5 in the morning and I wouldn't get back till like 8 or 9 p.m. because we would sit at school all day and we didn't have a ride. So we couldn't get back home. And I remember, man, going through those football practices, all I wanted to do was just go home and sleep and get some food and call that a day. There were so many times I would be pulling up to football practice, especially after game days, just completely exhausted, not even wanting to show up. But I vividly remember one coach, and this specific coach, he was like the energetic coach. And so, of course, I pulled up to practice, tired, kind of going through the motions, stretching, and all the stuff that we do to start practice off. And this coach would be the one walking around and be yelling. He'd say, I need more false enthusiasm. That's what he would always say every single time we warmed up and we weren't given the energy that he wanted us to show. He would say, I need more false enthusiasm, just yelling from the top of his lungs. And then whenever he said that, of course, all the players would just get louder and we'd try to show up, like show with the false enthusiasm that he was talking about. And I just thought that was like a powerful thing that he taught us as young men growing up to bring the energy. Like even now, as I'm doing this podcast, I'm trying to bring a sense of false enthusiasm or a sense, some type of energy that I'm conjuring up to do this thing. And it's not only with this podcast, but it's also showing up to classes and trying to do things for the startup and internships and all the other things going on with rugby, especially bringing that energy, even if you don't necessarily have the energy, just showing it. And it's that false enthusiasm that I think is pretty powerful. But today I want to get more vulnerable and a lot more serious about the episode. Because, of course, I like to start it off with maybe something to like hook attention in and hopefully make some laughs or I don't know, whatever happens. But I've been doing a lot more self discovery and do all the things I need to do to take care of myself. And one of those things is really trying to overcome this binge eating habit that I've caught myself in. And I experienced it this Sunday where we come from this weekend. By the way, we just won a huge tournament for the Midwest, and so we're heading to nationals. But more on that in the life update. But coming back from that weekend and having all the things on my plate with the internship and both internships with the search fund and Deloitte, and then the startup, and then school because I have midterms coming up. So I was trying to study and also trying to run a paper, like all these things swirling around in my head. That on Sunday, when I finally got back from the tournament, I was just swamped, like completely overwhelmed with everything that I was doing. And I think I talked about this in the last episode, where it's not necessarily stress that I was feeling, but it was something. And I couldn't exactly put my finger on what it was. And my best guess was just being completely overwhelmed. And lately, I found out about this guy who's really big into mental health and something that I don't know. I just grown up this way. Maybe it's part of the culture. Maybe it's just a part of being a man, but I've always had this negative connotation towards therapy. Because therapy just seems like, oh, the therapist just tells you all the problems you're going through and reaffirms everything and doesn't really solve anything. And while that happens, there's like this stigma behind mental health that I think as Polynesians is kind of how we're wired. But after you overcome that, then it's trying to figure out what resources are actually out there to help yourself through these mental health challenges. And so I do what I always do, which is turning to resources like books. And usually I try to find a couple books, a couple podcasts to really do a deep dive into all this stuff, trying to figure out the ins and outs of a certain topic. But the tough thing there is trying to figure out which topics, which people, which speakers that I can actually trust. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there that I don't really want to fall into. And there's this evolutionary shortcut that we have as humans to trust the experts. Like if I find someone and they're an expert in a certain field, then I can just make the shortcut to trust whatever they say in that field. Because it would take way too long for me to go and test myself whatever they're saying. Like if an expert in health says that certain amount of walking will burn a certain amount of calories. It would take way too long if I would go and test everything that they say about walking and making sure I have a certain climate and all these things. So we make certain jumps and shortcuts based on what the experts say. And that's something that I've definitely found myself for sure. Hanging on to these pillars and look at them as like, okay, I can trust this person about this particular topic. I can trust that person about that topic. For example, whenever I listen to like Alex Hormozy stuff or Layla Hormozy, I feel pretty confident that I can trust them with business advice. And in a similar vein, I feel pretty confident that I can trust someone like Jeff Nippard with and exercise advice. And I was trying to find someone who I can trust for this mental health stuff. And it took ages and ages. But then my friend put me on this dude who I've been diving into a whole bunch of his stuff, and it's actually fascinating. There was this Indian kid who grew up addicted to games, and he failed out of school with like a 2 point something GPA. And then his parents kicked him off to India. So he went to India, became a monk or lived at a monastery or whatever. And then he came back and then went to Harvard med school or something like that and became a psychiatrist. And that story I think is so cool. But through all of that, now he's taking all the things that he's learned, both as a monk and this Harvard student, and putting it into podcasts and videos and all the things like that so we can learn from it. So I've been diving into a lot of his stuff. And one of the coolest insights I had this week, listening to a podcast of his, was about binge eating. And it was a huge light bulb moment because this Sunday is exactly what he was describing in the podcast. And he went over 3 big reasons why people binge eat. And all these 3 reasons, it's like a feedback loop. Like as soon as you do one of the things, then it turns into a flywheel effect where you keep going downhill and spiral into a binge eating episode. And the first thing is that you're running away from something, some type of emotion that you're feeling. But then the second thing is that you don't know exactly what emotion you're running from. And then you feel shame that you're running in the first place. And because you feel shame, of course, you eat more and it just spirals down until you finish the whole box of cookies. And when he put it in those words, it was like an aha moment because that's what I was doing. And the way to confront that effect he was saying in this podcast is to practice managing your emotions. And this was the other aha moment, is that this entire time for the past how many months, really this whole year, I've been looking at my biggest constraint being my physical health. Like if I can get my physical health on point, then I think it'll just unlock like this whole nother level of happiness or something. When really, it's not my physical health that's holding me back. It's my emotional and mental health. And what that means, it's that I'm not able to fully manage, first of all, fully identify my emotion and manage them. Because just because I'm feeling an emotion doesn't mean I have to act on it. But that second step of this 3-step process of binge eating, where I don't know what I'm running away from, that is the part that I really want to focus on moving forward and really practice this week. But then the next question becomes how? And I think the way I do it is by being present or being still. There was a story I heard about a week ago. That was Ricky. That's like a very, very old song. But I heard the story. It was like this guy. I'm not sure what his position was in the church, but he's some authority, and he's introducing some journalists who are coming through the LDS temple, the Mormon temple. And as he's going through the tour, going through all the rooms, he's just showing them, okay, this is what we have, the stained glass, the symbolism for this and that, and showing them everything that the temple has to offer in terms of like the rooms that it has. And then he finally gets to one of the last stops on the tour. And it's this thing called the celestial room. It's the room where, like, the most holy place in the world, because that is where God is most present, where his spirit can be most felt. And before he goes into the room, he explains to this group of journalists, says, okay, we're about to go into the celestial room, which is the most holy place. So when we go in there, I'm going to ask you guys to be silent, to be quiet. And then feel free to ask me any questions after we leave, and we'll continue the tour from there. So they go into the celestial room, and of course, it's dead silent, and everyone's quiet. And as they exit the room, the man asks the journalist, he says, does anyone have something to say about what they felt? And one of the journalists, they raise their hand slowly, and they say, I never knew silence like that was possible. Now, the whole point of his story was to illustrate this idea. Well, first of all, like how holy the temple is, but really the big takeaway for me was like being still. And when he said those words, I didn't know silence like that was possible. It reminded me of how important, how powerful it is to be in solitude and be okay with being alone. And that's what I think is the key to managing my emotions. First of all, now I'm going to test run it this week and moving forward. So I'll let you know how it goes. But this is like the in the weeds, getting my hands dirty of how I plan to overcome this binge eating habit that I got. And I hope that no matter what happens, whether this works or it fails, I'll fail forward, obviously, but hopefully it'll help someone out there who's maybe going through something similar. But I think the same principles that apply to binge eating apply to any other addiction you want to put on. People run away from emotions or things going on in their life, and they'll turn to, it doesn't have to be food, it could be drugs or alcohol or weed or any of the other things. But I think these principles apply to whatever addiction. And one of the ways that I hope to at least help me work through it is by being still, being present. And the way I'm defining that is listening to myself with zero distraction. Because a lot of the times, especially when I'm eating, I'm like listening to a podcast or watching a video in the name of productivity or like calling the family. And then we're like killing two birds with one stone. When I found that doing that is extremely distracting and it doesn't allow me to be present and be still. But the other thing that I found with that too is I think prayer is actually super helpful. And no matter if you're religious or not, prayer is, I think, more of like a meditation or meditative state where you truly try to zone everything else out and try to listen to yourself with zero distraction. Now, of course, in prayer, you're trying to connect with God. But in meditation, it's like you just trying to connect with yourself, really be in tune with like what you're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, all those things. But I think meditation and prayer is actually a super big part of how to be more present and be still. Those are all the main points that I wanted to get in this episode. There's also another thing that I want to explore. One of them being how venting is unhealthy if you don't act on it. So I was listening to this guy, Gamer, I think his name was like Gamer Health GG, the Indian psychiatrist, Harvard medicine guy. But he had a podcast episode and it was like, why venting is always bad. But really, the main point of his episode was talking about like this farting analogy, where if you have like a room of people and one person farts, and the other person says, oh, farting is okay. Farting is good for you. You should keep farting. And then they fart and everyone encourages it and no one does anything about it to stop the farting. Then pretty soon you're in a room and it smells like complete doo-doo. And his point behind that story is like, that's what venting is. And the reason it's bad, or the scenarios where venting is bad, is when you don't do anything about it. It's like when you're just farting all over the other person and the other person's like, yeah, keep farting. And you don't actually do anything to stop the farting. I thought that analogy was actually pretty good because it's the reason why psychiatrists and therapists, the first thing that they do is they reaffirm the other person and what they're going through. Because venting is the first step of the process. It's like first you vent, you recognize what the problems are, what the issues are that are going on. And then you start taking steps to change your situation and to change the problem, to actually solve it. Because if all you're doing is like venting and not actually taking steps to solve that problem, then it's just like farting and you're not stopping the farts. And I can totally see how that applies to me, especially with all these past episodes where I think that's what it's been. It's like me venting in a way about binge eating and these habits I'm going through and not actually taking steps to solve that farting problem that I'm doing. And so finally being able to quit Eno, more on that in the life update, but quitting Eno and actually taking steps towards helping myself stop farting, it's been like pretty empowering because now that it's recognizing how I am able to take care of myself, I have that ability. Now it's a matter of how do I do it? Another thing I want to talk about is running with the virtue vice scale that I was talking about in one of the last episodes. But it's a mental model where and any virtue pushed to the extreme is a vice. And in this scenario, the two virtues on the scale that I'm thinking through and trying to balance is unity and diversity. Because if you push unity to the extreme, then you get like super stubborn, super dogmatic views, and everyone has to believe this one thing, and that's unity. On the other side, you have diversity. When that's pushed to the extreme, it's like it's relativism. Everything is relative to how you feel, what your feelings say. And I was applying that to building Nisha Nexus, more on that in the life update, but building this group and community of people where it not only has unity and like common beliefs and the way we see the world and cultural values and all those things, but it also has diversity in terms of like thought and background and experience. But it's a powerful balance I'm trying to think through as I'm trying to build this group or community of people. And there's a video I saw this week that it's in the description on the Notion page, so just click on that. But it was about one of the leaders in the Mormon church, the LDS church. And the way the church is structured, there's like the first presidency, which is the three top dogs, basically, and then under them there's like the 12 other top dogs. But they're like the main group that runs this entire organization, which is like extremely, extremely vast. So it's their responsibility, their duty to run this whole thing. And when you look at them, it's impressive how they find that balance of unity and diversity because they're extremely diverse in all their opinions and all their backgrounds that they have. They're extremely united on the things that matter most, which is their religious beliefs, their personal values. And saying that out loud, actually, I think this can also apply to like relationships, trying to find unity with the partner, but also diversity where you're not like one of the same with everything. I don't know. That's just pretty interesting to explore later. But in the video, it was this guy named Henry B. Iron. And I did not know this, but this guy graduated from Harvard Business School and taught at Stanford. I might have that backwards, but he has been to Stanford and Harvard and comes from this whole business background education. And he's been studying how to run meetings and he knows his stuff. Like this guy knows how to run efficient, fast, productive meetings. And when he was called to the top dogs of the church and joined their ranks, and he goes to one of their meetings where they're all 15 over there, and he pulls up and he sees the way they're running the meeting. He's like, what the heck? Not has to be like the most inefficient, weirdest meeting I've ever seen, especially assuming that these are all like top dogs in the church. He assumed that they would mostly agree with like everything because that's just how it is. But something he said is that from all his Harvard and Stanford education and background, I forget all of that because it's a different thing here. And the big lesson from that is how important it is to be united on the big things while also having diversity on everything else. I think those are all the topics I wanted to cover. So let's move on to the life update. First, we'll start off with work. And like I mentioned earlier, I finally did it. I worked up the guts to quit Eno Succession, search fund internship. And honestly, I'm pretty sure he felt it coming, but the past 6 months, I mean, they've been a huge learning experience and a huge blast being able to learn so many things about search funds and how to be a leader and how to intern and all these different things. That was extremely valuable. I just sent them like a quick Slack message talking about, oh yeah, I can't do it because it's tough. Honestly, it is. Like it's negatively affecting my physical and mental health, which that's when you know it's time to start taking stuff off the plate. That's when you know it's time to start saying no to certain things. So I finally did it. I said no. And one of the reasons why I think it was so tough for me is just like human tendency and psychology of loss aversion. Like we're more afraid of losing things than we are to gain that same thing. But that is probably the biggest update, which also affects my health update because having more time has really been a blessing to focus on everything else. But yeah, I was just completely overwhelmed with all the things I had going on in my life. That was an amazing decision and follow through that I did. And then with the Deloitte program that I'm doing, it's been pretty chill. And honestly, I definitely could do more work, but I just got so much other stuff that I want to do rather than that project. I'm doing the other stuff instead. One of the things that I am doing is Nisha Nexus. So this past, I think it was only a couple days ago, but I recently did the LinkedIn post launching Nisha Nexus, and I got some pretty good traction. The next step is actually seeing if people are going to pay the $100 and how I'm going to deliver value to those people. But it's been good connecting with everyone, all these Pacific Islander founders who are out there on LinkedIn. I think it's awesome. And then with school, we got midterms coming up. So that's a grind. But now that I don't have to worry about the internship with I'm able to just do more work for school. So that's a dub. And tomorrow there's a program, the Global Engagement Summit, that I'm gonna pull up to. We'll see how it is. It's like a thing for social ventures, but we'll see how it goes. Next update on my people. Now, this one is interesting because, especially this past weekend, I felt it hard. Where on Sunday, I came home from church, straight home, and I fell into a binge eating episode. And then later that night on Sunday, I went to hang out with my people, and I could totally tell that I was just off. I felt completely distracted and wasn't present in the moment at all because was like looking through my phone and not really paying attention. And they could feel it too. They're like checking in on me. Hey, Dean, are you okay? You definitely seemed off. And that's a prime example of how not taking care of myself affects my relationships with my people. Because I can't love my people if I don't love myself. Like I can't take care of my people if I can't take care of myself. And that was a perfect example. So going through that, I think was a really important wake up moment for me to actually really value how I've been approaching this whole binge eating thing and purposefully take steps to overcome this thing. Quitting is one of those steps, and practicing mindfulness, where I'm listening to myself with no distractions. That is a purposeful step that I hope help me through this thing. And finally, update on myself. I mean, I've been talking about it this whole episode, but of course, there's me trying to overcome this binge eating habit. But the other thing is that I, this past weekend, won this rugby tournament. Honestly, I thought we were going to pull up and just completely get smacked. Because in the finals, the team we went against, they beat us by like 70 points a couple months ago. And so to come back and go against that same team and kill them by like 30 points, that was awesome. But I definitely saw how my conditioning was just, oh, that is a huge constraint on my rugby skills right now. Because that's easily the biggest thing holding me back from being an amazing player. Because I can get like a sick run in, but after I do the run, like I'm completely gassed. Maybe I'll upload that to this episode, the highlight that I did. I just thought it was pretty sick. But yeah. And of course, I can't believe I forgot to mention this, but definitely a big reason of why I fell into a binge eating episode on Sunday was because I stayed up super late and I was dead tired that day. So combination of being super tired and physically exhausted from the tournament and emotionally overwhelmed with all the work on my plate. It was just a very bad combination, which saying it out loud now kind of makes sense for why it led to an episode, but it just goes to show how important sleep is. And on that note, I'm going to head to sleep. So I'll see you in the next one and give an update on how things have been with these steps that I'm trying to implement in my life. And hopefully someone out there will find this journey that I'm going through valuable. Because know this, you are not alone. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.